Discover history like never before. Join us for an exclusive journey at India City Walks, where academia meets tourism. Led by resource persons like authors, historians, and master storytellers, they take you into a journey of authentic experiences where there's a blend of many stories, and you also do this through workshops, interesting bear tucks, heritage walks, and Guftgus. Today's walk icon is our esteemed guest, Dr. Richa Raj. She's an assistant professor with Jesus and Mary College. Richa has done a lot of contributions in the world of history through her academic contributions. She has won accolades both nationally and internationally, and she's also, her subject matter expertise lies in modern Indian history as well as oral history. I know you're doing a lot of things, but welcome today, Dr. Richa. It's really a pleasure to have you here with us.
Thank you so much, Nidhi. It's a pleasure as well for me to be here on this talk.
Thank you. On the occasion of the 78th Independence Day celebration, and we have you here today, so we thought that we must talk about the freedom struggle, the uprising of 1857, which is so closely related to all of us. And you have taught so many students on this particular topic and this subject. So we felt that is going to be a great thing to discuss amongst us today.
Right. Yes, sure. I'm looking forward to this, especially because it's the month of our independence.
That's
and
right.
1857 being also recognized by some scholars as the first war of Indian independence. So it's very important that we also should be able to be looking at that historically. Yes.
Great. So we're going to delve into that topic, but Richa, before I get there, I want to start my questions a little differently. And this is more related to the fact that what do you think is the relationship between tourism and history?
When we try to construct history, what we are actually doing is we're trying to make sense of our present by understanding our past, right? And what sites of historical importance, what they do is they try to build layers and layers of social, political memory for the people of a certain region, right? And through that, people constitute their identity. So I believe that if tourism is done with a certain degree of sensitivity and with a certain degree of historical sensibility, it goes a long way in understanding history and shaping, the identity of people of a certain region, whether it's a nationalistic identity or a certain communitarian identity.
Right. Today, we see many people have got interested in heritage walks, in storytelling. However, in the academia world, it's still not very popular to become a heritage walk leader or to become a storyteller. But they are okay to take the erstwhile route of becoming a professor.
Right.
Why do you think this is still not, a profession that many youngsters are opting for?
One reason that I can say is that it has still not, like a storytelling or retelling history of a particular area on the field is still not institutionalized. We do have academic history as an academic discipline, which is institutionalized across universities across the world. But this way of going into the field and then telling the history of that place, it does not have that institutional patronage. So that is one important reason. The other is that the kind of storytelling that you do have on the field is not really quite engaging with historical facts. It engages more with myths and ex-fantasies, fantastical, or even the way people kind of relate to that particular monument.
Right.
So I think what you all do is quite interesting. That you try to bring in a blend of academic and heritage, which is a very interesting initiative.
Thank you so much, Richa. Thank you for that answer, because I think we really want to urge through these podcasts, through these sessions. And I'd like to touch upon the fact that, the way we are doing this Walk Icon initiative also is in three parts. There are three segments to it. The first segment being a podcast, which we are doing today. It's a short discussion between the topic. This is going to be followed by a heritage walk. And the last segment is a Guftgu, where we're going to talk immensely and deeply about this topic all over again. So that is the way we're going to conduct this segment of Walk Initiative, the Walk Icon Initiative. So now let's get deeper into our topic for today. The topic being the freedom struggle, the uprising. I really want to start with whether it's called the uprising or the mutiny or the first war of independence. What do you think it's most associated with, and why does it have all these names, and what are the nuances to it?
Again, when we look at history as an academic discipline, we also find that there are multiple interpretations of any events that you look at in world history. So similarly, even for the mutiny, there have been multiple historical interpretations depending upon the perspective or the context that that particular person who's writing the history is coming from.
Right.
For example, we find the imperialist school, which looked at the colonial records and which spoke, from the side of, from the perspective of the colonial government, and said that this was only a sepoy mutiny, that these were misguided soldiers, and they came to an indecisive, emperor, right? And whatever they did in Delhi, when they conducted the siege of Delhi, there was complete, obstruction of law and order. That is one particular way that it has been written about. The other way that it has been written about is about how this is the first war of Indian independence. This has been written in several different ways, even though the idea is ascribed to V.D. Savarkar. But in many of the histories of the revolt of 1857, there has been this idea that there was, at a very nascent stage, the idea of the Hindus and the Muslim community fighting together, fighting for a common geographical space, which later came to be known as a nation. Right? So there was that sense of Hindustan, that there is this nation in which both the Hindus and the Muslim communities live together, and now they must fight.
Right.
So there is this entire idea of the nation, a very nascent, even though, that comes up, and a quite democratic way of organization of the rebel administration that was there.
Right.
So therefore, that is how looking at what kind of sources that you have actually consulted, that one has come up with multiple interpretations.
I understand that.
Right.
Thank you for clarifying that. See, when we go to the ridge, which is something we're talking about, the 1857, we're talking about the 1857, the first war of independence in context of Delhi today, because Delhi was one of the most important areas and locations of the entire uprising. But when we talk about the ridge, today it's very popular amongst people for walking, taking a stroll there, going around the monuments there. But if we were to just go back in time and go back into a virtual reality of what was the scene back then, could you paint us a picture of what happened at that during that time?
Okay. So we see that, with the mutiny at Meerut, we find that, by 11th May, 1857, soldiers who crossed the, pull that is made by boats across the Yamuna River and reached the, residence of Emperor Bahadur Shah Zafar, which is the Red Fort, right? The Lal Killa, Shah Jahanabad basically, and entered through the Paharganj area. Because the other gates, meanwhile, were closed. Especially, Calcutta gate was closed by the British officials when they got news of how this entire hordes of soldiers who were coming. They crossed the Yamuna and they were coming and shouting, crying slogans, Deen, Deen, that is for religion, and Badshah ki duhai, and so on. Right? So, and once they entered, they unleashed this entire their fury against the British government over the officials, and also over those any symbol that they saw that represented British colonial government. For example, they also tried to destroy the magazine that was there. But of course, that was ultimately the one that was closer to the Red Fort, was ultimately destroyed by bombs by the English officials themselves. right? But the idea that they completely went around killing the English officials, and then they went inside the Red Fort, and then they asked the emperor to lead this entire struggle against the colonial government, right? So ultimately, their siege of Delhi of the rebel soldiers let the British officials, the ones who could escape outside of Lal Killa, primarily through the Kashmiri Gate region, because beyond that was a ridge, and then you have the cantonment of the British government.
Right.
And many of them also escaped to Karnal, from that area. They also escaped to Karnal. So therefore, the ridge became a very important site of battle, if we can call it a battle, or this entire struggle between the rebel soldiers and the British government. And it was almost for about 3 months, up till September, that area, that entire northern ridge area, becomes a site in which the British officials were either killed or wounded, or they went missing, or many of them lost their way in the forested area, or even died because of malaria, because of snake bites, and so on. And that also included not just the European officials, but also the native soldiers who were recruited in the army. But one very interesting thing about this, revolt of 1857 is that many of the native Indians deserted their regiments and took the side, went on the other side, on the side of the rebels. So that becomes very important. So what we see is this entire sense of betrayal,
Right.
of the East India Company, of the entire British mechanism there. That their own soldiers have betrayed them, they have deserted them, right? So in various accounts, we see that, especially of the regiments that were stationed in the cantonment area, there's this suspicion amongst the European officials that are they going to desert us or not, right? And for many days, they harbored that suspicion.
Right.
So that entire area, therefore, is very important and holds a lot of historical importance as far as the revolt of 1857 is concerned.
And we are going to be actually walking the ridge during the heritage walk that we are going to be conducting. So you'll actually be able to see the area that we are talking about, which is the ridge area. And there are many other monuments dotted around the line of that area, which are going to be covered as a part of the heritage walk. So when we're talking about the revolt, as we talk about the revolt, what do you think were the main reasons behind the revolt? Of course, as a part of the movie Mangal Pandey, we all know one of the reasons that were popularized, but I'm sure there were many other reasons for the uprising. What were some of the key reasons for this uprising to finally take place?
Yeah. So you see, there were, of course, as you said, the most important reason that all Indians have studied since school time is the fact that, the cartridge issue was one, which kind of also hurt the religious sensibilities of both the Hindus and Muslims. The newly introduced rifles were said to function with cartridges that were greased with cow and pig fat.
Right.
So that was, however, also linked to the idea of the larger anxiety about interference of the colonial government regarding the religious sphere of the people, right? And especially it started with the soldiers. We do see in the beginning of the 19th century, there were certain protests amongst the soldiers when they were asked to go across to Burma to wage the battle for the East India Company there.
Right.
And there was this entire anxiety that being upper caste, many of the soldiers were upper caste Hindus, that crossing the 7 seas would kind of hurt our caste sensibilities as well. So there were already these issues going on, at least which have been recorded since the beginning of the 19th century, that there was a certain sense of anxiety, and also the fact that Christianity, India had been open to the evangelicals from Europe, especially from Britain, and therefore there was this idea that now Christianity is going to be spread, everyone is going to be converted to Christianity,
right.
And therefore and also the fact that even the new laws gave property inheritance rights to the newly converts as well. So there was that one religious issue that was very important. The second issue is, of course, the political sphere, that even politically, many of the erstwhile, members of the aristocracy, they were deprived of their privileges with the entire annexation, of the East India Company over many parts of Britain.
Right.
So you had, the very recent annexation of Awadh, and the way, it came about, it also hurt many of the soldiers who were from that region. Right. So that entire deprivation of, that entire thing of how political, control was also being taken away, and it was appropriated by the East India Company. That was one. And then for the peasants and the artisans, so this issue of political sovereignty being taken away was largely that concerned the feudal entities of this region. But 1857 was also a manifestation of anxieties that were faced by the peasants and the artisans as well. Because of the new land revenue policies in the region of Awadh and Bihar and so on, that led to this overtaxation of the peasants. Right? No relief being given to the peasants in the case of a drought or things like that. Right? So, and also unemployment as well, because of how the East India Company, as we know, it was a trading company, it had monopolized the market. It was forcing the artisans to, sell their products cheap and buy dear from the East India Company, right? So that had also rendered many artisans to become unemployed. Right. So there was an economic reason as well. But along with that, I would also, like to add, something that is also of late, in the among the historians that is being discussed, is also about emotions. Often we talk about economic history, we talk about political history, but we have not really so much talked about emotional history as well. Right. So the revolt of 1857 is important because it also showcased how emotions were so much, ripe on both sides. On one hand, there was this entire sense that the Indians felt of anger, resentment, hatred for the British government, right? And on the other hand, the British, when this revolt actually broke out, they felt that this was complete betrayal, right? This was treachery, that the Indians are not capable of reform and they should be left to their own. We are here, but we will let them have their own, institutions, right? So that also, the emotional aspect of revolt of 1857 is also very important.
I'm so glad you touched about the emotional aspect because, even often when we do tours around the theme of 1857, covering the Ridge and other areas, we sometimes even have people who are, from the British background, and they come and join these tours, and we have to be very, very cautious about the balance between, the hurt was on both sides.
Yes.
Of course, it's always debatable which side was hurt more. And sometimes, we can be a little biased to say, yes, our side was more hurt. But one has to take a very balanced approach to the fact that this was not good. It was hurtful for both sides, as you just rightly mentioned.
Yes.
But you also mentioned about emotions. And I'd like to touch upon the fact that Bahadur Shah Zafar too, who was a very emotional, creative, someone who loved to be in his arty thoughts, suddenly became a prominent leader. He was probably chosen as the leader to, for the revolt of 1857. How did that happen? Was it manifestation? What happened to him that he became he came out to be, everybody came under his wings and he was, sought after to be leading the revolt of 1857?
It's actually quite ironical that someone who was, completely into the arts of peace, especially, was actually, proclaimed as the leader of this very bloody, episode in Indian history. And what we also need to understand is that he was, in many historical accounts, it has been mentioned that he was quite taken by surprise himself. That when the rebel leaders actually came inside the Red Fort, he was quite surprised as to why did this happen and all of that. Of course, he himself was a pensioner of the East India Company.
Right.
The entire governance was completely in the hands of the East India Company, and he was getting a pension from the company. So, but then what we see is that gradually he was also coerced in a way, saying that you are a Mughal leader and you are a sovereign, even though it was a symbolic sovereignty at that time of the Mughals. But yet the fact is that the rebel soldiers, they rode all the way from Meerut here, and they were followed by several other soldiers joining them, and peasants and artisans and so on. And they, Zafar was quite indecisive initially, and ultimately he was coerced. But he also told them that, look, it's all right, you can call me your sovereign, but I also don't have the money to feed the soldiers, because after all, soldiers have to be fed.
Correct.
They also have
you
to
need
be given
resources.
the salary. Yes. So therefore, what was decided was that a government, kind of an executive committee was formed, executive council, right, in which officials were appointed as the wazir and the qazi and the kotwal, and so that law and order could be maintained in the city, because the vacuum that was created after the killing of the British government. Yet, this is also, it's very interesting to say that, like in historical interpretations, it is said that this was only a revolt. Some say it was of the sepoys, and some say that it was of the feudal landlords to restore their original feudal order. But we don't really see it like that, because all of these feudal entities, whether it's Bahadur Shah Zafar in Delhi or whether it is Rani Lakshmibai in Jhansi, both of them are indecisive initially, and they are pushed from the ranks from below. They are coerced to join this entire struggle. So we really can't say that it is a feudal entity, a revolt that was led by the feudal entity.
Got it. Yeah. When we're talking about Bahadur Shah Zafar too, what comes to my mind is William Hudson. The caged beast, the way he captured the Mughal emperor, and then, of course, the assassination of the princess. Would you like to throw some light on that?
Yeah. So you see, once the British, the East India Company, when they got reinforcements from Ambala, more regiments joined them, and they were able to cross the ridge and entered Delhi. So by the beginning of September, they were able to attack Delhi and attempt to take it back. What we see by that time is sort of a failure of the rebel government that had been established, because there have been reports of how there were plunder, loot conducted by the rebel soldiers themselves. And the reason was very simple. There were no salaries, as I said earlier, no food also. And because of this scarcity of food, many of the merchants and the traders, they hoarded grain. And that led to the rise in prices of the food grains.
Right.
There was a steep inflation that came about in Delhi. Right? So there was this entire sense of scarcity, etc., which led to desertions. From the rebel soldiers, many soldiers went back because there was nothing for them to eat here in Delhi. It also led to this network of spies who would go and spy, give information about what was happening in Shah Jahanabad, give information to the East India Company. Right? So as a result of this, so the East India Company was able to build a network of spies through which, and therefore getting involved, with the intrigues of the princes within the Red Fort, the company was able to, and especially, the British official that you just mentioned, Hodgson, were able to coerce Bahadur Shah Zafar into giving himself up, surrendering. Right? And it was, as we all know, that at Humayun's tomb that he was taken, and he was taken all the way from Humayun's tomb to Shah Jahanabad, with crowds kind of moving along with him.
Yeah.
All of that. And of course, it was, at the what is known as the Kuni Darwaza today. You see the Kabuli gate. There, the princes of Bahadur Shah Zafar were killed. Right? That is also why, that gate is called Kuni Darwaza.
Right.
And in public memory, the fact that that name has continued for a long time, right? And also the fact that in the ridge also there is a small water body which is known as Khuni Jheel.
Right.
Right. It also shows that even though so many years, or rather, centuries have passed, but people do remember that certain incidents did happen here as well.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's remained in the minds of many, and today,
Yes.
through our books and initiatives like this, it still remains that how many people lost their life.
Yes.
Just to ensure that the struggle for freedom started, because had it not started,
Right.
you and I would have not been sitting here today free.
Yes.
And talking like this.
Absolutely. And it's quite unfortunate that the rebel soldiers, we don't have any, not much kind of memorialization has not been done.
Right.
Whereas on the other hand, we do see that, the European officers who were killed, we have a mutiny memorial on
for
the
them.
ridge. So the East India Company and the later British government did spend some funds, in having a memorial on the ridge. But on the other side, we don't have much of a memorialization of the
people who
of the
were
Indian
involved,
side,
yes, of the Indian
on
side
the
who were
Indian
involved.
side, yes.
Right.
And similarly, it's also interesting to note that when memorialization was done of the European officers by the British government in the later part of the 19th and early 20th centuries, they have completely, if you look at the mutiny memorial, they have only the numbers of the native soldiers who were killed, how many native soldiers were killed, but their names
the
are
names.
not there. So they've completely been missed. So only the European officers enjoy that glory, of having died on that ridge. But what about the native Subedars?
Right.
What they were also high, as compared to the Indian side, that was a high rank.
Right.
Their names are not there, and not even the names of the soldiers, Indian soldiers,
Yeah.
that are there.
So during the revolt of 1857, many in Delhi revolted against the British. But it is also said, and we are sitting in Chandni Chowk today, it is also said that many Seths of Chandni Chowk still supported the British. Would you shed some light on how did they do that, and what did they get in terms of rewards in return?
Yes. So again, because the rebel soldiers were unable to restore law and order, despite the fact that officials had been formed, there was an executive council that was formed, right? And there was many of the rebel soldiers took to plundering,
Right.
and especially it is also said that the princes from the Red Fort itself, sent sepoys, they call telangas, to the houses of the Seths to force them into giving money, so that the salaries to the sepoys could be paid off, right?
Okay.
And mainly these were the banker families, the very rich banking families here in the Chandni Chowk area, most of them Hindus, right? But that has nothing to do, actually, their religious identity really has nothing to do, because in the revolt of 1857, it was both the Hindus and the Muslims. But the inability, of the rebel government, despite the fact that the 1857 revolt had a lot of scope in terms of turning it into a national revolt, despite the fact that it had a lot of, intensity, in terms of mobilizing several sections of the people, not just the aristocracy, but also peasants and artisans, as we've seen in Awadh and so on. And also despite the fact that the impact of this revolt, to the extent that even it kind of changed the sovereignty shifted from the East India Company to the British government, right? It also, sort of also led to this failure of the rebel government. And therefore, what we see is that many of the Seths, of the banking families, because they were so resented this entire plundering, that they began to turn towards the East India Company. That they began to feel कि पहले जो था वो बेहतर था.
Correct.
There was a system, there was a law and order, there was some kind of governance.
Let's go back to that.
Yes, let's go back to that as well.
So, Richa, today we are in the world of technology, and we use technology in everything we do. It is believed that during the revolt of 1857, the reason why the British were safe or they won the uprising was because of the use of telegraph. Is that true? Could you throw some light on that?
Well, it's true that once the rebel soldiers entered Delhi and they kind of started to take control of Delhi and kill British officials, the telegraph office that was situated at near what is today the Flagstaff Tower.
Right.
It was near there, but now it is no longer there. There were young British, the East India Company employees there, who were able to immediately send a telegraph back to the regiments, in Peshawar and Ambala. Okay. Right? So therefore news kind of was immediately transmitted that Delhi is under siege, that it has been attacked by the rebel soldiers. And that is also the reason that the reinforcements came from Ambala and from Shimla and so on, right? And then joined the forces at the ridge of the East India Company, right? So which led to some of the people within the East India Company to say that it was the electronic telegraph that sort of saved Delhi for us, right? But if we look at the entire sacrifice of the Indian native soldiers, if you look at the people of even from the British side who lost their lives there, I don't think they would agree that it was only the telegraph that kind of saved Delhi for them. It was a lot of struggle, and taking back Delhi was not easy. Right? There was a struggle of about 3 months, 3 to 4 months on the ridge. Right? Many people were killed there. And also one important thing is that the telegraph route that connected Calcutta to Agra, right, to Peshawar, and then to Bombay and Madras. When the rebels, especially in central India and northern India, when they rose against the East India Company, they routed off the telegraph wires, right? They destroyed telegraph wires because the telegraph wires were basically, symbols of imperialism of the East India Company, right? And also the finance is so interesting. It is not as if there was the Indian side lacked technology, right? It was only that they lacked in terms of military, reinforcements. The East India Company had access to a better, superior, organized military strength, right? But it is very interesting to see how, once the telegraph poles were destroyed by the native soldiers, they used the wires of the telegraph to make crude bullets, for their rifles, right? They cut the poles of the telegraphs and used it for fire. And the iron, pillars were perforated and used as local cannons by the rebels, right? So, the Indian side also, just because, a scientific knowledge was not shared by the East India Company, at least at that time, it was not shared with the Indians, did not mean that the Indians did not have that kind of knack for technology.
Got it. Right? We always have a way out.
Yes, absolutely. So that is a very interesting fact about the 1857. So it would not be entirely true to say that the telegraph actually saved Delhi, because the telegraph lines were completely routed by the rebel soldiers as well in central and northern part of India.
Right, right. Thanks for that clarification.
Yes.
We are now going to move to the next segment, which is called Myth Blaster with Master. In this segment, we are going to ask a set of questions, a set of myths that are attached to the 1857 revolt, and we would like Dr. Raj to answer us on those.
Yes, sure.
So the first myth that is associated with 1857 is that there was something called the chapati movement. Today we use social network to connect with each other. We have Facebook, we have Instagram, we have everything. But in that period of time, also people found a way to connect and send messages. Is that a myth or a real nuance that somebody actually used chapatis as a message format?
Yes, it has been reported by the British officials themselves, something that they could not explain as to what was really happening. That, days before the revolt actually broke out, chapatis were being distributed, especially amongst the chowkidars of each of the villages in many parts of north and central India. So one chowkidar would go of one village, would go to the other chowkidar of another village, carrying 2 chapatis with them. And he was instructed to make 10 more chapatis of the same kind and hand over 2 to 5 chowkidars, in the other villages. So this has been considered by some scholars of history as some kind of a message that was being relayed amongst the villagers that soon there is going to be a revolt. But it is not because of the very nature of this circulation chapati. It was a secret act that was being done. So nothing concrete can actually be said as to what was the reason, but there are reports of circulation of chapatis.
Right. Yes. We're going to touch upon one of the myths which is related to one of the locations that we also cover in our walk, which is the Khuni Jheel.
Yes.
It is often said that if you are visiting Khuni Jheel after sunset, it is unlikely that you come back. This is associated with the haunted stories of Delhi.
Yeah.
Any comments you'd like to make on this?
I'm not really, equipped or trained to talk about the supernatural. But I would like to also talk about rumors instead,
Right.
how rumors have also played a very important role in trying to understand the historical past, and also at the same time in engineering a particular movement or a particular revolt. So rumors on both sides in the revolt of 1857 were very important, of rumors of sedition, that the East India Company officials were scared of, and on the other hand, the rumors of conversions to Christianity, etc., that caused a lot of concern and anxiety on the Indian side. So even for this issue, there are a lot of places that are considered, as having some kind of a supernatural element. I think in that particular area, it keeps alive the memory of so many people that were killed.
True.
So perhaps, this kind of a thing kind of, sort of also helps in building up the memory or how we try to imagine the historical past in that particular area.
Absolutely. Yes. Very recently, many of us have watched Hira Mandi, right? And Hira Mandi has glorified the way courtesans also played an integral role in the entire freedom struggle. But in the time period of 1857, was that period also the period where courtesans existed, and did they also play any integral important role in this revolt?
Yes, there were definitely courtesans, and they were also facing a lot of issues with the British government, because of the various kinds of acts that were passed, especially related to venereal disease at that time, which pushed a lot of them towards prostitution. So there was a decline in the kind of power that they had enjoyed earlier, in the previous centuries, etc., and the kind of patronage that they had enjoyed earlier. But with the decline of the Mughal power and the decline of the aristocracy, that patronage was also declining.
Right.
So there are stories of how, some courtesans also gave money, to pay, salaries to the sepoys as well.
Right.
There are definitely, also
Stories,
instances. Yes.
So we see that Delhi was flourishing as an area of art, culture. There were so many poets. There was mushairas happening during the time of Bahadur Shah Zafar. We have also heard about Ghalib being very prominent in that era.
Yes.
But we believe the fact that the uprising of 1857 really changed the fabric of Shahjahanabad. Would you like to throw some light on what really changed in terms of the cultural and art aspect of the city?
Yes. So once again, with the decline of the Mughal a symbol of sovereignty and the decline of the patronage that the old aristocratic families enjoyed, and how they were the actual patrons, along with, of course, the traders and the merchants. But the nobility, the aristocracy, were the patrons of the Hindustani music and dance forms. So when that declined, what we see is that the conduits of patronage are acquired, by the artists in other more local regional centers, not really in this, Mughal center, right? For example, you have the Gwalior, Gharana, right? You have Patiala, Rampur, Varanasi also, became an important center. So these are small regional aristocratic. Also, the Rajput states. There was the state of Alwar, that began to offer more and more patronage to the musicians. So what we see is that, and we therefore see also an assimilation of that local regional form along with this classical form. So, for example, in Bengal, in Bengal, what we see is that many of the, especially after the annexation of Lucknow, many people from Awadh, went to Calcutta, and there they got in touch with the Bengal Renaissance, what is said, at that time, and it kind of took to a new form of music, right? So what we see is that there is a sort of, new ways that are chartered by the classical forms of dance and music.
Yeah. So we hope we've debunked a lot of myths today. And this was such a wonderful session where we spoke about our freedom struggle. We spoke about, the uprising of 1857. We spoke about so many people, stories attached to it, and really celebrating the true spirit of our Independence Day, which is on 15th of August. The whole idea of patriotism ignites amongst all of us more deeply, more dearly with the conversation I've had with you today. Thank you very much, Dr. Richa Raj, for sparing this time. But we're just not letting you go right away. There is one more question. In fact, there are two more questions that I'd like to ask you. The second last one being, nowadays the word historian is being used so loosely. But really, I want to know, who is a historian?
That's a very profound question, I must say. Well, I would say that, first of all, a historian is someone who tries to make sense of the past, who tries to construct history, right, with a certain set of methodology. There is a certain method to it, because you're not only telling a story, it has to be based on certain sources, right? And that relationship between the historian and the source that the person is looking at is very important, because I believe that the historian must not just depend or rely entirely on the source, but also should be able to question it, negotiate with it, look out for other sources as well, and always be open, to a revision of the argument that the historian has put forward, rather than only saying that, no, this is the absolutist kind of history, right? So I think a historian is someone who has this kind of a very sensitive relationship with the sources, and is also open to newer ideas, newer information, and is able to also revise their own argument.
Fantastic. I think that's a very fabulous answer you've given. So that we can also popularize and we can make people aware of the fact that do not use the word historian loosely. Be responsible about it and ensure that it is used only in the right context for the right resources. So that would be our plea to everybody, all our viewers today. And of course, the last question to you is, what are some of the books that you recommend that our viewers can actually read on this subject of 1857, the uprising?
Yes. Okay, this is my favorite part of the interview. One is, of course, one important book that deals with the various kinds of historical interpretations is an edited volume on 1857 by Biswa Moyapati, a very important book to read. A second book would be Again, a series of articles that were published in the EPW. Again, that's on the 1857. Again, for someone who wants to know deeply about this particular revolt, must definitely read that book. A third one is edited by Professor Shireen Muswi, which is on the facets of 1857. Again, in that, there's a very good article that is written by her on the Urdu press of Delhi. Right. So again, so that is one important. Now, for those students of history who want to look at the immediate responses of the Europeans or the Indians through their correspondence, etc., for them, I would say there is a Penguin Reader, which is edited by Pramod Nair. That would also be a great book to read. At the same time, however, because the revolt of 1857 has generated so much of interest, there is a very rich bibliography. A large number of works that are done on this particular revolt. I would like to add 2 books in Hindi as well. One is by Amritlal Nagar, which is called Gadar Ke Phool, which is kind of an oral history narrative on the 1857 in the area around Awadh. So for people who want to look and know or read about the first-hand account, of the 1857, they should definitely read that book. And the other is by a well-known journalist, Aditya Awasthi, Hindi journalist, and it's called 1857. I'm sorry, I'm not able to recall the entire title, but it is about the 150 years of Delhi. Right? So that is also a very good book because it is very pacey in nature. So anyone who loves to read drama, and also that particular book is able to very nicely locate present Delhi and establish that link with the Delhi of the 1857. Right? So these are some of the important books that are immediately coming to my mind.
Yes.
So I'm sorry not to forget one more edited volume by one of my favorite professors, Sabyasachi Bhattacharya, on 1857.
Excellent. We're going to mention all these books as well in our comment section, so that people can actually refer to these books. But thank you very much once again. Like I mentioned, that this is just the beginning of a 3-segment session with Dr. Richa Raj. We are not going to stop here today. This was just the beginning, the first part where we did the podcast. We're going to follow this up with a heritage walk. Details of the heritage walk are mentioned right here below. And of course, a Guftgu session. In the heritage walk, we're going to walk through the monuments that we spoke about today in our discussion. But in the Guftgu, we are going to go and dwell deeper into stories. हम बहुत सारी कहानियाँ सुनाएंगे और सुनेंगे about the Delhi that was in the period of 1857. So I look forward to seeing you all of you out there, and catch you very soon. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you so much, Nidhi. Thank you.
Thank you.